Good morning, everyone. Hope everybody had an amazing week. I know we did. Welcome back, all you guys from Cape Lookout. Hope everybody made it home safe. I think I've spoken to everybody. Another great time. For all the men and their kids, next year, every year we go to Cape Lookout. We have for the last 2 years as an annual men's retreat type thing. We go do a lot of fishing, we eat a lot of food, have a lot of fellowship, and great time together. So go ahead and begin to mark your calendars for next year and get your forward drives ready, and we'll get a little more detail around that as we go forward. Okay, this morning we're going to be in Daniel chapter 3. Before I jump into Daniel chapter 3, I want to remind you that we have First Sunday. I think last week I said First Sunday was coming up this week, but it's not First Sunday this week. It's next week. So remember, next week, November 6th is First Sunday. So looking forward to seeing everybody back in the building. And remember, some of this information has been leaking out slowly, and we'll continue to talk about it on First Sunday coming up, but we're going to be flipping up how we gather. So we're going to focus on gathering First Sundays in gather groups, and then the remainder of the Sundays for each month will be in the building. And so we're going to kind of shift things up again. Just feel like that's maybe the direction the Lord's leading. I'm looking forward for everybody to continue to gather back together on corporate settings. So it should be a fun time. Looking forward to seeing what God's going to do with that. I feel like there's something for that and for us as a body. So I'm looking forward to seeing what He has in that season. All right, so Daniel chapter 3. We're going to jump in here. We're going to do chapter 3. We're going to do all of chapter 3 today. It'd be good to go back and read. Go ahead and read the book of Daniel at some point. Go back and read it. Jesus refers to him in Matthew 24:15, talking about the prophecies of Daniel, talking about it relating to end-time events. But what we want to focus on today is through Daniel. Daniel is, they're in captivity, Babylonian captivity, a little background. Babylonian captivity in the mid-600s AD. And so they're there and they've been captured. And Daniel, along with a couple of other Jewish young men, have been brought into the king's court and brought in as somebody, those who would be trained up, and they would serve the king at a high level. They were educated. And so you're going to see through the book of Daniel the theme of worshiping no other God but Yahweh in the midst of everything. And that's going to be kind of the focus of all of Daniel. And because they're captured, they're captives, and they're behind enemy lines per se. And as they're behind enemy lines, they are refusing to bow down in the midst of every challenge, threat of death, and we're going to get into that part today. They refuse to bow down to the gods of Babylon, the gods of the world at that moment, and God continues to find Himself faithful through all of that to protect His children behind enemy lines. So today, that's kind of what I wanted to encourage us on, because we're, as we continue to move forward in a culture that continues to, be like the culture. The kingdom that we've been born into, the kingdom of heaven, is not the culture of the earth. And so the kingdom of heaven is what we're here to establish the culture of heaven, the culture of who Jesus is in the earth. And the earth and the world systems and all of that, it's not the kingdom of heaven. It is Babylon. It is like the Babylonian times. And we have times and places that we have to continue to be like Daniel and stand up and worship the Father and worship Jesus and hold fast to our beliefs, hold fast to the person of Jesus, hold fast to who we are in that kingdom, because the real kingdom that we are part of, the kingdom of heaven, that kingdom overrules or supersedes the kingdom of the world that we're in every day. So Daniel chapter 3, let's jump in. We're just going to go verse by verse all the way through 3. And just listen to this, and just we'll just pick up on how Daniel continues to encounter this, because I feel like Daniel would be like many of us in our culture today. There's so many things that we have the ability to worship, so many things we have the ability to culturally be a part of, and we don't have to be. And we can manifest the kingdom that we are born out of, not the one that we are actually living in the world system itself. All right, so Daniel chapter 3. Nebuchadnezzar, the king, made an image of God of gold, whose height was 60 cubits, and his width was 6 cubits. So 60 cubits and 6 cubits, about 90 feet tall, roughly about 6 or 8, 10 feet-ish wide. So it's probably a figure. The figure, we don't know what the figure is. It could be a figure of himself, Nebuchadnezzar, who's the king. It could have been one of their gods that they serve. It could have been just one of their idols they serve. And so he's created this idol, and he's set it up in center stage. And as he set it up there, he set it up in the plain of Dura, in the province of Babylon. Verse 2, and King Nebuchadnezzar sent the word out together all the satraps, the administrators, the governors, the counselors, the treasurers, the judges, the magistrates, all officials of the provinces, to come to dedicate the image which King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. So the satraps, administrators, the governors, counselors is in verse 3, the treasurers, the judges, magicians or magistrates, and all officials, the province gathered together for the dedication that Nebuchadnezzar had set up. And they stood before the image that Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Verse 4, then a herald cried aloud, to you it is commanded, O peoples, nations, and languages, that at the time you hear the sound of a horn, flute, harp, lyre, the psaltery, in symphony with all kinds of music, you shall fall down and worship the gold image of King Nebuchadnezzar that he has set up. All right, this is the instruction now. It's like you're going to be out in your yard, you're going to be raking your yard, you might be mowing your grass, you might be walking your dog, you might be at work. And when you hear this sound of this music, when the things are beginning to go off, you're to fall down and to worship this image. So this is the picture. You're to worship. So it'd be like looking towards a particular image, and you're worshiping that image. Verse 6, and whoever does not fall down and worship shall be cast immediately into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. So there's a real consequence to not falling down. Like if you don't worship and you're caught, you're going to go into a fiery furnace and you're going to be burnt up. So at that time, when all the people heard the sound of the horn, the flute, the lyre, the symphony of all kinds of music, all the people, nations, languages fell down and worshiped the gold image which King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Therefore, verse 8, at that time, certain Chaldeans came forward and accused the Jews. And the Jews he's talking about right here, if you go back and read Daniel, he's talking about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And these three guys, along with Daniel, are like, they have been serving Yahweh, and they've been serving Yahweh faithfully, and they've been found by the king to be very valuable and also esteemed, and he's put them over their provinces. And so they've found them to be very beneficial in his service. But then it comes to find out that, hey, verse 9, it says, they spoke and said to King Nebuchadnezzar, O king, live forever. You, king, have made a decree that everyone that hears the sound of the horn, the flute, the lyre, the psaltery, the symphony, with all kinds of music, shall fall down and worship the gold image. And whoever does not fall down and worship, then they are cast into the middle of the fiery furnace. There are certain Jews whom you have set up over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men, O king, have not paid due regard to you. They do not serve your gods or worship the gold image which you have set up. And then Nebuchadnezzar, in rage and fury, gave the command to bring Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So they brought these men before the king. Nebuchadnezzar spoke, saying to them, "Is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the gold images which I have set up?" Now, there's a question right there. There's a question. And you have to begin to parse this in your heart, right? And because right now this is an external thing. They're standing before the king, and they've been told. It's been told that they did not fall down and worship when the music began to play. And now they're in front of the king, and the king says, "Is it true that you will not worship my gods, and you will not worship?" Now I think right now we should ask ourselves in our own personal lives, and what do I fall down and worship? What is worship? What do I give my attention to? What do I give my heart to? Where are my actions? What's birthed out of me? What do I serve? And so this is in our culture today, even right now, this is a very defining thing for us, because it's too easy, excuse me, it's too easy today to say you believe one thing, but then externally you function a different way so that you're accepted in culture. And so that you walk one way, or say you believe one way, but you actually display something else. And now they're getting ready to have the understanding here of, hey, you're before the king, you have an opportunity, you either got it. And the penalty here is real. The penalty is real. The penalty is like, oh, we're gonna kill you, and it's not gonna be an easy death. It's gonna be death by fire. Now I just need you to sit in this for a second and think about the goodness of our Lord, the goodness of Jesus, and what are our beliefs lie with Him? When we are up against the wall with things, do we get moved? Are we moved by our culture? Are we moved by politics? What are we moved by? And what do we rest in? What do we put our hope at? All right, verse 15. So he says, ask him the question, you're not going to worship my image? Verse 15. Now, if you are ready at the time you hear the sound of the horn, the flute, the lyre, he's given them another opportunity here. All the symphonies, all the music, and fall down and worship the image, excuse me, that I've made, good. But if you do not worship, you shall be cast immediately into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. And who is the God who will deliver you from my hands? Now, excuse me, prior to this, we're in chapter 3. Prior to this, in chapter 2, if we go back and read, Nebuchadnezzar has already had an encounter with Yahweh, like the God of the Jews. He had an encounter with it because Daniel had came and gave him not only his dream, but gave him an interpretation of his dream. And Nebuchadnezzar had already said, Yahweh is truly the God of all gods. If you go back to verse 47 in chapter 2, it says, the king answered Daniel and said, truly your God, talking about Yahweh, is the God of gods, the Lord of kings, and the revealer of secrets, since you could reveal this secret. And so Nebuchadnezzar has already recognized this, and so we're getting ready to have another encounter with the God of the universe, not the little placating gods which are demonic that are set up by man. Verse 16. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this matter. If that is the case, our God, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us from your hand, O king. That's in verse 17. As believers, as people born into the kingdom of heaven, right? End of Hebrews 12, we received a kingdom that cannot be shaken. There has to be such a depth of character and a depth of belief that we're not moved, just like these guys here, that we're not moved off our beliefs. We're not moved off of who Jesus is to us and who he is to the world, and that we're not moved. And these guys are not moved. Verse 18, but if not, let it be known to you, O king, that we do not serve your gods, nor will we worship the gold image which you have set up. Verse 19, then Nebuchadnezzar, full of fury, and the expression on his face changed towards Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. I guess he was assuming when his expression changed to him, because they were been very beneficial to the king, he was assuming they were going to kind of give in and go like, there's no way they're going to give in and they're going to fall down. And they basically said, no, we're not going to. And so he gets frustrated, angry, and he spoke and commanded that they heat the furnace 7 times more than was usually heated. And he commanded certain mighty men of valor who were in the army behind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to cast them into the burning fiery furnace. Verse 21. Then these men were bound in their coats, their trousers, their turbans, and their other garments, and were cast into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. Now, verse 21 is basically they said whatever they had on, they just bound them up, and they threw them in there. Have you ever been too close to a campfire or a bonfire? Your shoes get too close. Your shoes might be resting on the rocks around it or stones around it. You notice it begins to melt it'll melt the rubber on your feet. And so these guys, so anything that gets close to heat begins to get affected by heat. If it's hair, it's singed, it's burned, and you can smell it, and you can smell how it smells. And so they're getting ready to go in with everything fully clothed and everything on. Verse 22. Therefore, because the king's command was urgent, the furnace was exceedingly hot, and the flame of the fire killed those men who took Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So the guys that were throwing them in were killed because the heat was so hot, it killed them. And then it says, verse 23, and these 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell down, bound into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. 24. Then King Nebuchadnezzar was astonished, and he rose in haste and spoke, saying to his counselors, did we not cast 3 men into the midst of the fire? And they answered and said, King, yes, that's true. Verse 25, look, he answered, I see 4 men loose, walking in the midst of the fire, and they are not hurt, and the form of the 4th is like the Son of God. Yahweh is making himself known again. And for him to make himself known in this position, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego had to have the faith to believe beyond the adversity for him to show up in that. And so what I would like to say right now is that whatever faith we exercise is going to be the only thing that manifests the kingdom. And so our faith and our belief manifests the kingdom of heaven wherever we are in our jobs, whatever we do in our daily life. That faith will manifest. That 4th person was seen in the midst of the fire because they ended up in the fire. Do you see what I'm saying? And so by faith, we have to continue to face our things. Otherwise, the testimony of the Lord doesn't need to be present. We operate in our own strength. We don't take a risk. We don't move in faith. And so therefore, why does God need to be in the midst of the furnace if you're not in the furnace? Because of your faith and your belief. Verse 26, then Nebuchadnezzar went near the mouth of the burning fiery furnace, and he spoke, saying, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out and come here. Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came from the midst of the fire. And that's wild. This is true firewalking here. And the satraps, administrators, governors, kings, counselors gathered together. Everybody's going to gather around and take a look at this. And they saw these men on whose bodies the fire had no power. The fire had no power over their body. The hair on their head was not singed, nor their garments affected, and the smell of the fire was not on them. Nebuchadnezzar spoke, saying, Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who sent his angel and delivered his servants who trusted in him, and they have frustrated the king's word and yielded their bodies, that they should not serve nor worship any god except their own God. This principle is true today. It's that paramount in our culture today. That we leave no excuses there. And that our life is lived in such a way, and it's not a hard life to live, it's a life of belief and faith. And they did this, and this is the testimony. They have frustrated the king's word, and they've yielded their bodies, they've surrendered, they've put themselves in harm's way because of their beliefs, they've surrendered their bodies. They should not worship any other God except their own God. Verse 29, therefore I make a decree that any people, nation, or language which speaks anything amiss against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and they're talking about Yahweh, right? Shall be cut in pieces, their houses shall be made an ash heap, because there is no other God who can deliver like this. Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. That's chapter, verse 30. Now, there's so much encouragement in this story right here. We need to go back, as you're in your gather groups, go back and pull this encouragement out, because it's this, I continue to believe it's this important that we operate our faith and our belief in at this level. That we're only worshiping the Lord your God, and that our interior world continues to match what our worship is going towards. And our interior world continues to shape what our external world is. And so therefore, that we're manifesting faith and belief, just like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego did. Because when they stepped in faith, God showed up and He was glorified. Hebrews 11:6, without faith it's impossible to please God. For those who come to Him must believe that He is, and that He is a rewarder of those who diligently seek Him. It's that faith, the faith in the person of Jesus, the thing that we say we believe in, that we've received. Our times and cultures, people and politicians, it will continue to grow darker and darker, but the light of Jesus will continue to grow brighter and brighter. And we have to be the ones who carry the light, who stand up and carry the light, and carry it in such a way that we fulfill the great two commandments that Jesus says. The greatest two commandments: love the Lord your God, Yahweh, with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. He summed everything up in those two commands. And when we move like that, and we be like that, we walk in our belief system like that, we order our life that way, we order our hearts that way, then we begin to see the manifestation of there's somebody else with you in the midst of this that we can see. It's God Himself. It's Jesus. It's the Holy Spirit. It's heaven. It's heaven. Heaven is behind you, and heaven is with you. And if you go back over to the last verse, this is what happens when we walk in the kingdom. You walk in the kingdom, you walk by faith, you continue to believe what the Word tells you and begin to walk in the blessing of what Jesus has laid out for us. And this is what happens. This is what happened to Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. It's verse 30. It says, then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. We walk in faith. We walk in belief of what the kingdom of God says. We walk in kingdom. We walk in the kingdom. And we will be promoted. We will be lifted up. So, treat that out in your group today. There's so much in here, so much encouragement right here in Daniel chapter 3. And you can go later, you're going to see David in the line. I mean, you're going to see this further in here. So just go back and read read that and be encouraged. In your gather groups today, be sure and pray for one another. Continue to lift up each other. Continue to carry the burdens of the people sitting beside you. Have a great week, and I will definitely see you first Sunday, November the 6th.